Interviewing guests is the best and fastest way to build an audience. Building a large audience of people who love your work means you have a bucket load of people who could become your clients. But interviews that are boring kill your growth and waste all the time your audience invested. If you had an interview that flopped, forget about round 2 with the guest and forget about getting that audience to come back a second time because you baited them and you didn't deliver. So we're going to make sure you get it right the first time in this video. I've produced thousands of interviews in my agency, everything from value investing to menopause. I've worked for a ton of podcasts and I've seen firsthand what interviews go on to make shows and what shows were ruined. And I'm going to cover 4 main things. What to do before the interview. It's shocking how so many people do a bad job here and end up with totally useless interviews. And number 2, how to conduct the interview itself. I'm going to give you things to consider to level up the experience and to pull out more value for the audience. Number 3, what to do immediately after the interview. And of course, the last thing, but definitely we can agree the most important, how to get your guest to share and talk about your episode. Now, before we dive in, here's some prime value for you. There are 3 types of interviews you should be doing on your podcast on a regular basis. All of these are designed to give maximum value to your audience, but hitting them from different angles. Number 1, you want to be interviewing your past and current clients. That one's obvious. That's for building authority. Number 2 is you need to be interviewing people who are already living the dream version of your ideal clients. And that's good to get the insights and stories about their journey so that your audience can begin to plot out what their journey would look like based on insights that they've received. For example, if you have a podcast that's talking about getting people to their first $1 million year, you might have guests on who are at $10 million a year or $100 million a year to provide those insights and those stories about how they went through their journey to live the life that they're living and what that actually life looks like, living at that multiple 6-7 figures a year life. Finally, the 3rd type of interview you need to be doing is you need to be interviewing experts who can widen the perspective, provide alternative solutions or different niche adjacent solutions to your audience. I am on this podcast or I'm on this video talking about turning listeners into clients. I might have a guest expert who's proficient in running Facebook ads and have them come on and provide that adjacent perspective in how people can market to their audience. Now, the biggest takeaway here is your audience must be able to take away something from every single interview you do. No interview that you do should be self-serving. I'm not just on this interview to tell you about how great I am or how great my products are. There must be some nugget that they can take away and apply to their lives. It's all about what's in it for them. People only tune in to what's in it for me.fm. All right, so I don't want to build this up in your mind too much and make it overwhelming for you. So let's just start with the basic assumptions here. You already have built your list of potential clients you want to reach out to. They're tailored to somebody that they want to provide to your show. Maybe they inspire you, you're interested in them, they're living the dream life of your ideal clients or yourself, whatever that case is. You want to send your pitches out and have them begin booking to be a guest on your show prior to doing too much research. And that's because you don't know who's going to say yes or no. So instead of researching somebody for a few hours for them to then say, no, they don't want to be in your podcast, that'll be a waste of your time. So you're going to want to then just begin the research process on the ones who have confirmed and accepted to be on your show. After you've done that process, now you need to then do your due diligence. You want to go through everything that they've done, all the other interviews that they have done. If they haven't done interviews or don't have any social presence, that's a red flag. Depending on the type of podcast you have, there are some experts in the medical field and such who may not have done interviews. They may have only done publications. That's fine. But if they don't have a presence, you don't know what their personality is going to be like. And so it's going to be very tough for you to determine if they'll be a boring guest or actually bring some entertainment and value. And a lot of that's going to be dependent on how well you can interview. But you want to front load as much as the work in this process, just to make sure that the interview can be as best as it can be. Look towards people who already have a social presence, already have a visual or audible personality, which you can then vet. And then from there, you want to see what values they have and do they align with yours. If their values don't align with yours, that's a good indication to not have them on the podcast and go through the process of apologizing, unscheduling that interview and moving on. What you don't want to happen is to be on a podcast, be on this episode, locked in for an hour, 2 hours, where you are constantly clashing because your values don't align, or you feeling guilted into publishing the episode because you spent the time to make it, and the episode goes live, and something comes out later about that guest that if you had just stuck to your values, you wouldn't have had them on, and you wouldn't be in a situation where you're, by association, reducing your level of integrity. I hope that's clear. So now that you know they're a good fit for your audience in terms of values, we move on to the next stage. As you go through all of their content, or as much content as you can, you're going to begin to identify the gaps that were left out in previous interviews and conversations that you can dive down and dive into in your interview. So make a note of that. You're going to also identify what are the narrative pulls for the audience, meaning what points did they lean in and light up, and what areas were very well done on those episodes, on those other episodes that you want to also do on your episode. So those same questions, those same trail of argument, find those and make a note of those to pull on those for your interview as well. I guess maybe on 10 shows, but your audience hasn't listened to 10 shows. They're looking for that one that matches. And they may be looking for yours on your podcast to become a member of your audience. So don't neglect questions that were asked in previous interviews, especially if those questions were a hit. The next is you're going to want to niche down their expertise into your show's context. So they may have a broad expertise in a variety of topics, but what makes your episode stand out, your episode with them stand out, is that you are catering to your audience's wants and needs, and your audience's journey. And so if you can pull their expertise in and ask them specifically about your client situation, they're on this journey. How would you apply your expertise to this? My audience is this type of person. How would you apply this thought process to this type of person in this situation? This is where they're coming from. This is where they're going. This is where your expertise is. But how can we contextualize that for them? That's what's going to make your episode stand out. And that's going to provide a different angle, a different level of questioning to keep your guest on their toes. So they're not just regurgitating the same information over and over again. Now that you've identified the gaps which you want to explore in your episode, the narrative pulls, which are going to be a hit on your episode as well, and once you've contextualized their expertise into your show's context by asking those specific questions, you now have a base, what we call a collaboration plan, which you're going to take into your interview. And trust me, your guest is going to appreciate all the work that you did to make this collaboration plan, and your audience is going to benefit, and they're going to appreciate all the research that you did as well. And I'm going to show you exactly how this plays out in the next section. If you're liking this video so far, remember to hit the like button, give it a thumbs up, please, and subscribe. Now let's move on to how to conduct the interview itself. So it's the day of the interview, the room is open, and you and your guest have both arrived. Begin recording that conversation immediately. Even before you dive in and you start with the intro or whatever you're doing, begin recording. Because anything can come up at that pre-interview section that will be very valuable nuggets for your audience. And you don't want to not have that because you didn't record. So let them know, hey, I'm already recording, but we're just talking at this point, and move on to what we're going to do here, which is your pre-interview. At the start of your interview, you spend the first 10 to 15 minutes doing this. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to share your collaboration plan with them and enroll them in the vision of the episode. Like, I want to encourage you to see your interview as something that's very special. It's a combination of minds. This conversation is something that is potentially very transformational, and it should be approached with reverence and with care and understanding. So as you approach this collaboration plan, you want to share your vision for the episode. I want this to be something that people are going to get a lot of benefit from. This is who my audience is. And I've seen some of these gaps. We're going to talk about these things. I want to talk about these things. And you want to enroll them in that. Next thing is you want to ask them what is the major offer that they want to promote on your show. Everyone should be promoting something, and you should be encouraging that, because you never know if your episode will be the thing that makes or breaks it for them. So have them give you the main offer they want to promote with all the links and what would be the best selling point for that. Write it down and make sure to use it in the interview. Next is you want to get the lead-ins for the things that came up for you in the collaboration plan. Let's say, for example, you have the gaps that you want to explore and you have narrative pulls. You may want to ask them what led to some of these things. And that will give you an idea as to how to then queue up the question as you go through the interview. So you don't want to get the full story, but you just want to get an idea. So okay, I have a general feel for how this conversation is going to flow from start to finish, from their story to getting deep into their technical expertise. And so now, okay, I can bleed in this main question about this narrative pull this way. And now that we've gone through all of that, our 10 to 15 minutes pre-interview is done, and we're getting into the meat of the interview. I want you to know that you have the questions, but do not be rigid to the questions. Allow for more questions to be asked. As your guest answers the questions, there may be follow-up questions you want to ask. So, and you can go down that path. So it's important to remain present because you never know where the interview will take you. I despise podcasts that have the set number of questions they ask every time. I have these 5 questions, boom, 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 and they don't allow for, let me actually follow up, because your audience needs that follow-up. They heard something that was interesting to them, and if you didn't follow up, that's going to be a big letdown for them. So use the opportunity to stay present, allow for serendipity. Another quick tip, do not share your questions ahead of time. I've been in that situation before myself, where I gave my guests the questions ahead of time and they just came on and just went through answer, and I didn't get a chance to speak for like the first 20 minutes of the interview. And that was a very terrible interview in my estimation, because I didn't get a chance to push back, ask questions. And, they're talking for 20 minutes. You don't get a chance to go back to then say, oh, when you were 5 minutes in, what was your thought here? You just lost it completely. So don't prep the guests. Don't give them questions beforehand. Trust me. A great interview technique is the have, do, be framework. You find out what they did, then you find out how they did it, and then you find out why it happened. Or why can take many angles. It could be, why didn't you do this? Or why did you do this? Or why did you even think about this in the first place? Why can take many angles. The benefit of this is you may not be able to replicate, or your audience may not be able to replicate the what, but they can replicate the thought patterns. They can replicate the motivations. You guys might say, well, I did my first triathlon, but I didn't know how to swim beforehand. That's the what. And you might ask, well, how did you do that? How did you get to that point? And they'd tell you, well, I trained for it. I got a coach and they taught me something, whatever. And then you can dive further into that to then ask them, well, why do you even want to run a triathlon in the first place? And then that would give you now the insight, or give your audience the insight. And that why might be something that resonates with them. That makes everything else make sense. They may have listened passively to the triathlon, the idea of a triathlon, because they have no idea or no desire to run a triathlon. But the why, if the why resonates, they'll go back and everything will make sense for them. And then that will connect, and that will be the thing that gets them to transform. So remember the have, do, be framework. The have is the what, the do is the how, the be is the why. You want to check in regularly with your guests in places where it won't interrupt someone's train of thought, or it won't mess up the vibe or the chemistry. You want to pause and say, how are you doing? How are you finding this interview? Is everything going well for you? Do you have any questions? And just to build that rapport, have them know that you're still taking this very seriously, and you care about the relationship and you care about the conversation. Just checking regularly to make sure everything is going well. And you might find that a lot of people have reservations, even as they're speaking, that they just didn't feel comfortable bringing up. But you giving them that opportunity will then allow them to relax a little bit, allow them to be very authentic with you about, have some real thoughts about what I just said there. Could we maybe do it over, or could you ask me the question in a different way? So be mindful there. So that's it. Congratulations. You've gone through all of these steps and all these different things to consider, and you had a great interview. Here's what to do next immediately after the interview. So keep the recording going. Don't stop the recording, because like I said, while you two are on that call, you never know when great stuff are going to come up. And even after the interview is done, they may say, hey, I still have some doubts here. Can we actually retake this section? And that's perfectly fine and allowed to do. I've found in my experience that guests are usually very nervous after the interview is done. It doesn't matter if they're a well-trained speaker, they've done this 1,000 times before. They usually want some reassurance from you, the host, as to how they came off and how they resonated with you, and how you think that they would resonate with the audience. So quickly give them that reassurance. It's a great interview. I loved it. I loved how he spoke about these things and spoke very authentically. I think this is going to be a great interview for my audience. Give them that reassurance, unsolicited, and they're going to really appreciate that. Also, spend time building that relationship. It's not just, all right, the call is done, bye, take care. Ask them about, what are they going to do next with their day? What's next on the horizon for them? What are their plans for the year? You want to build that relationship up with them, because that's going to pay you dividends, not just for your podcast, but for your business and life. So spend the next 10 to 15 minutes or more after the interview just doing that. And finally, you want to give them the next steps. Okay, so I'm going to send it to my team, or I'm going to edit it myself, and I'm going to give you, next, a shared drive, whatever, a shared drive with all the files and links or whatever. Give them a very clear picture of what the next steps are for the episode. Don't just say, all right, thanks, bye. Here's what we're going to do next with your show, with your episode. So they have that reassurance and understanding. And then send an email follow-up that has that same information in a thank you email. So thank them for the episode and the conversation. Here are some of the main points that really stuck with me. And here's what we're going to do next. And finally, the last section, and definitely the most important if you're here to generate the maximum amount of clients from your podcast, here's how to get your guest to share and talk about your episode. As a surprise to no one, the first and most important thing is if you did everything leading up to this, if everything that you did before the interview in terms of your research and the collaboration plan was done well, if everything you did in the interview, the pre-interview stage, and the conversation was very well done, that you had the chemistry and the rapport and you were constantly checking in and making sure everything was okay, if the post-interview chat was well done and they feel connected to you in that regard, you built a relationship, continue to do that and send the thank you email, then all this is now the icing on the cake. You're going to send them an email when the episode is about to go live. And you're going to send them an email when the episode goes live. In the email when the episode goes live, you're going to want to send them the shared drive with all of the resources. If you have images, if you have videos like Reels, you send them there. You don't want to send them the links to all the destinations, the Apple Podcast, the Spotify, the YouTube, the Amazon Music, everything that they can have it at their fingertips. Give them an update as to when the date is going live, and thank them again for their participation. And any feedback you get after the fact, whether it is your audience is posting stories about it, or they're making content about it, or they're sending you emails about it, collate all of that and send it to them as a follow-up email and say thank you again. Tag them on those things on the social media profiles as well if they come up to you on social. In the emails that you send to your audience, ensure that they get a copy of that as well and put their call to action near the top of that email as well, just to give them that boost. Finally, if they have an account that's larger than yours, send them the reels and all the videos and ask them to post it and I'd use a collaborator. If you are bigger than they are, you post it and then you collaborate with them. They'll have no problems doing either of those things if you already did well in the previous steps leading up to this point. And that's it. If you do these, you'll not only be making an amazing episode, but you'll be building relationships that can take your business, your podcast, and your life to the next level. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more actionable podcasts and advice to attract and convert more high-ticket clients.